We're live.
Hello, Thad. Yes, indeed, we are live, alive and thriving. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm doing really well. How are you?
Yeah, just marvelous. Thank you. Lovely to be
Wonderful.
back. It's been a couple of weeks, I think. And here we are on your LinkedIn Live profile, just connecting in on the work you do, the great work that you do regarding divorce coaching. Today's topic is one that is likely on the minds of many parents who might be in that somewhat difficult position of deciding whether separation is the right next step for them. The topic is, if I leave, what happens to my time with the kids? And I imagine that's one of the biggest fears that may even stop a parent from making a decision about separation, losing time with the kids potentially. And I'm certain that you have a wealth of knowledge and experience that you can share today that helps to demystify some of that and bring some clarity to what actually happens regarding this matter, relationships and times with the kids.
Yeah. Thank you, Vicky. When we were developing the topics for each of the weeks, and this was one that I sort of thought about, and there's like a million scenarios going through my head. What happens if the kids are like 4 and 5 years old, or if they're 14 and 15, or if they're toddlers, or if they're, you know, newborns and there's a newborn baby, if it's one, if it's three, if it's five kids, what do we do? How do we handle? And each has a unique situation that requires a unique approach. It's not, this isn't okay, we're going to take the kids and this is they're going to fit into this form, and this is how I'm going to react, and this is how my ex is going to react, and we're going to be able to. There's no cookie cutter here. This isn't an exact science. We're dealing with our feelings, we're dealing with our partner's feelings, and we're dealing with our children. And it's there's not an exact answer, but just some guidelines. Like, it does have a factor what the age of the kids are. For instance, a newborn baby or a baby that's still suckling is not going to be, you're not going to get 50% time with the kid. That's just not going to happen. It's not practical. And then if we go to the other extreme, you got a 16-year-old. Is this 16-year-old going to, how's that going to look in terms of separation and time? So there's a lot of nuances that are between that. So as questions that I think as an individual, we ask ourselves, how do I want to spend time with my kids? What do I want that to look like? If I decide to move out, what kind of arrangements will I have? The age is going to be important. Um, what is my relationship like with my partner? How does that impact on the relationship with the children? Do we have conflict in the relationship, or is the relationship just full of silence? Is there so many of these little things? So I'm going to try and narrow it down and use a very simple example. Say we have kids that are, I don't know, 7 and 9 years old. I'll just make up that number. And that there's no real acrimony. It's just sort of the marriage or the relationship has just petered out. It's just slowed down. There's some irritation, but there's more silence than anything else. So the conflict is undercurrent. So, you know, think this isn't working out. We're both unhappy. This is something. Now, what would happen if I don't leave? And I'm looking at this in 6 months' time or in a year from now. Would I be doing the same thing? Have I tried to work through the relationship? Have we tried to communicate? Have we gone to a therapist? Are there things that we can do together that will improve or salvage the relationship? Staying together for the kids, that's never been a good idea. Staying together for yourself because you're committed, that's something that you could work towards. But if those are things that aren't there, then what's the next steps? And I think that's something that, as a parent, as an individual, you want to talk about. So what is it going to look like if I move out? Um, how am I going to handle finances? What's the housing going to look like? How am I going to communicate with my partner around time with the kids? And if I do get the kids and say it's on weekends or we're going to do 4 on 4 off to alternate weekends, or however that might be, or where they're going to sleep. Do I have enough beds? Do I need separate bedrooms for them? Do I need to have bunk beds? Am I going, you know, those are all things that are considered. And I know I'm rattling this off at like a machine gun style, but it's there. These are so many little things that pause. Yeah. So as a parent, we sit there and say, I'm really had enough. I'm ready to move out. I'm leaving. But that instantaneous, impulsive thought has a lot of consequences. Get advice, talk to somebody, talk to your therapist, talk to a coach, talk to, you know, what does it mean? Talk to a family lawyer about what a parenting plan might look like, because you need to have things in place before you just leave. It doesn't mean that your rights as a parent are negated because you've left, but it's a lot easier to have the conversation while you're still there. That was a lot.
Mm.
There's,
It is a
there's,
lot. It is a lot.
yeah,
And there's a lot of nuggets of wisdom there that I can pull from that. I think the first is that let's not make the kids the deciding factor as to whether you separate or not.
right.
That's the first thing I got from that was don't let don't use your fear of what may potentially happen to your parenting time or your access to your children. Don't let that drive your decision whether to separate.
Hmm.
Because I'm
Because they're
hearing
two
they're
different
separate
things.
things
Yeah.
and yeah, and there's variables around each of those things that can make it a smoother path when you seek
Hmm.
advice and you understand what the reality can look like. Because I think we
Absolutely.
assume, I mean, you see TV dramas, you hear friends who've had nefarious experiences regarding separation and children being weaponized by one partner. You know, you hear terrible stories, and those stories are true. And
Yep.
I think it's important for people to recognize that it doesn't have to be that way if you've achieved some level of guidance and communication before it gets to that.
I do. And I mean, I'm thinking, oh, I don't know, it was over 25 years ago. I had a man come to me who's just really hated his ex, just really hated his wife, couldn't stand the sight of her, couldn't even imagine even having a conversation with her, and was constantly putting her down in front of the kids. And he wasn't a client. We were actually at a rugby game. And I sort of knew him socially, didn't know him really well. And I just sort of quietly, put my arm on his shoulder and I said, can we have a quick chat? And I said, so I really gather that you're angry at your ex-wife that, things have not gone well. He says, oh man, and he started the whole tirade. I said, but before we go any further, how do you think your kids feel about you? Do you love your kids? He says, oh, absolutely, man. The world they're my world. They're everything. I said, do you think they love you? And he says, absolutely. I do everything for them. I really make sure that they got everything. And I said, okay, so you get them, they live with you all the time? No, we share the time between alternate weeks. Okay. Okay. How do you think the kids feel about their mom? And he went, well, I said, so, you love your kids love you. Do you think they love their mom? And he says, well, I guess. I said, okay. So you love your kids, they love you. How would you feel if their mom talked about you the way you talk about her in front of your kids? He says, and he paused and he went, I don't think that'll be a good thing. And I went, I don't think so either, but just some ideas. You know, why don't we keep adult talk at adult level? I said, I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life. I'm just saying it's going to be a lot easier on you if you're not going to be angry all the time about your wife. Sure, there's things that happen, there's a whole bunch of stuff that went wrong, but do your kids need to have that adult conversation? They're kids. Let them enjoy. And he paused, and I saw him maybe a couple of months later. We were at a rugby game again, and he went, Really, thanks for that. The kids have been a lot better behaved, and we're actually talking through how we do things. And I've really tried to change my language around her. And I found that's been a common theme in 30 years of doing this, in that just having the conversation, adult to adult, keep the kids out of it. They're
Mm,
not they're not property, but they're your responsibility. All right.
mm,
And here in Australia, we have the law is about everything that we do is in the well-being of our children. Everything we focus on. It's not about protecting adult rights. It's about ensuring the children are safe, sound, and well. And that's our responsibility as parents. That's our responsibility as practitioners in the family law area. As a family mediator, that's my job, is to make sure that the adults remain adults and the children get to be safe and their well-being. It's something that
I giggle because
yeah,
I think you said the adults remain adults, but I think perhaps sometimes we can be reminded to just be adult. I mean, I think,
yeah,
emotions can feel overwhelming, and
yeah,
it can be quite easy to slip into a place of reactivity versus responding. And
yeah.
then we maybe react in a less than adult way. But you know what? I think your advice about, keep the adult conversations adult is relevant and practical for even if your children are adults, because the
Hmm.
relationship was between the parents. The
Yeah.
relationship doesn't need to include, whether the acrimony of the relationship that's broken down doesn't need to include anyone other than the two people that were involved in the relationship. And I think to bring any other, even adult child or any other adult into it becomes triangulation. It's something that isn't going to help the communication or the way you feel about each other.
And I've got to say, before this, just on that point, we as human beings look for allies. We look for people who can be empathetic, sympathetic to our cause. I'm looking for people that will agree with me because, and so we're going to use the kids as that. And so I think it's natural, but it's having to stop. And we've said this so many times on in this format. Pause. And the pause is, I mean, I hear my mother's voice, and she used to say to my kids when they were growing up, before you do something, is this something you would do in front of granny? And I'd be like, oh my gosh, right? But it's also, I've often thought a guideline for a lot of parents is this something that you want your kids to hear? Is this something you want your kids to feel? Because because just ask the question, is this something you want your parents to hear? Is there a third party that you respect and love that you would want them to hear your behavior this way? Because if it's not, maybe you want to pause. And it's not that you're going to do this perfectly. We're human. There's going to be a trigger. There's going to be that point where you just can't, and it goes off. But that's not the reason to make a decision or to act out rationally either. But it is a point to sort of say, oh, I did not behave my best. I was not in my best person that day or that moment.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's such an important conversation because
Mm,
what you're talking about there is standards and holding yourself to a particular standard that you will be proud of. Because what
yeah.
happens during a separation or divorce can linger. It creates memories for not just the child, but others involved. And so if you can bring your best self and hold yourself to your own highest standards in as many moments as possible, then you can also come out of it with a more clear conscience and know that you did your best and you didn't, we don't need to get caught in the drama because the drama can feel so good sometimes. Right. It can.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. It's a human experience, right? And perhaps a little less drama, a little more adult. Anyway, it's interesting. This topic really is about, let's also cover some of the your wisdom around the practicalities too. That leave, if you're the one
Yeah.
that leaves the family home, does that impact your relationship or your time with your children? I've just lost you. Let's see if we can get you back. That was obviously a question that was just a little bit too hard. Here we go. Was that question a bit too hard to answer, was it?
It was
That's one way to
technology.
escape.
I touched. I okay.
That's
Don't let
awkward.
me touch.
We're
Don't
back.
let me touch the laptop
Don't
while we're
touch
in
the
session.
buttons.
Yeah. Don't touch
Did you get the
things.
question?
No, I missed it. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So the question is really bringing us back to the topic at hand, because it's also interesting. But the question is, does if you're the person that's leaving the family home, does that
Mhm.
impact on your access to your children? Is there anything in the law or in your experience that says you leaving the home means that you lose some kind of access?
I'm not going to give the legal answer. I'm going to say, in the practical sense of my experience as a mediator in this area and as a divorce coach, making a decision to leave home doesn't negate your parental rights. But do not make the assumption that you're going to get 50-50 time, right? That there's never a guarantee that it may be a 70-30, it may be a 90-10, it may be, you know, because you're moving out. You make the decision to move out. And remember, we started with making the decision to stay or to leave. And we've had this discussion before because is it what's stable, what's financial, what's available, how's this working? Is it, do I need to leave? All those things depend. But now we've made the decision to leave. We leave and we move into a studio apartment and we have 3 kids and they're toddlers or they're under the age of 9. Maybe they're under the age of 9. Well, is it going to be practical to have them come and spend the nights with you? Probably not.
So I'm hearing the
You know,
answer is very much dependent on many circumstances. And that's why at the
there
start
is.
of this
Yeah,
conversation, you said it depends on the child's age, on your circumstances, on your financial ability, et cetera, et
yeah.
cetera, et cetera. So each
I
person will be
mean,
different.
I mean, if partners are separating and they have a limited pool and say they own a house together, but after they look at the mortgage and they look at debt and everything, and they may have $200,000 of net equity, what's $200,000 going to accomplish between the two people separating? It's not like we can, so there's so many different nuances to an answer that I provide. And it comes
Mm,
down to get advice.
mm,
Don't think rashly. Because you're having an argument doesn't mean the relationship's over. It doesn't mean that you need to burn all the bridges. It may mean that you need to move out to be safe, but it doesn't mean that it's an absolute decision. We think in terms of absolutes as human beings. I know I have. And it took me probably well into my adult years to suddenly realize that life is not a series of black and white. It's either on or off. It's a series of gray. There's shades in my life. And some things are going to be easier to accomplish and some things aren't. And so, for instance, deciding time with the kids may mean that initially you may only get them every other weekend. It may mean that you only get them on or times that it can drop off. So you spend time taking them to, say, a soccer game, or you take them to,
mm.
a
I'm
sporting
getting that
event.
it's
Yeah.
about the practicalities of what's
Yeah.
best for the children, which is what you've said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Over.
Thanks for
So
bringing it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I just wonder, is this something that parents can arrange ahead of separation?
It's having that discussion. I mean, if we're having the discussion that, what, we've recognized that the relationship is basically gone where it's going to go. It's time to leave. It's time to separate. We need to have that conversation between us as to what's happening. And that can happen. And, I know often we think of it in a television drama where there's renting of clothes and tearing of hair and things get thrown. Not every relationship ends that way.
Mm,
Most relationships can end in a peaceful way with a good conversation. It doesn't mean that it's pain free. It just means it's a good conversation. And talk about, how are we going to handle money? How are we going to handle time with the kids? How are we going to tell the kids that we're separating? Where am I going to be living? What does that all look like? So it's practical, and it's better if it's done in advance because you can agree to time with the kids. You don't need to get a lawyer or a mediator involved to do a parenting plan, but if you can't agree to one, that's where they can be of assistance. But it can be a parenting plan and they're available on the Attorney General's website, by the way. So, there are
Okay.
lots of resources that are available to you without having to hire a professional. It's always good though to get advice. I have found that when I wander my neighborhood in my head by myself, I get beaten up because my thinking is not always aligned to my best actions or behaviors or best choices. But if I have a trusted friend and a professional I can talk to, chances are I will have a better outcome. And that's what
Mm,
this is about, getting better outcomes for everybody. It's not about driving down absolutes, but driving possibilities.
mm. Beautiful. I love that. That's actually a really great way to wrap it up. And I do, I'd also like to just introduce this thought is that I think when change occurs, we as
Mm,
humans, generally, the human condition is generally to try to recreate what was. But
yeah,
a separation is change, and you likely won't recreate a family environment that was. But what you can do is create a new environment and the healthiest possible version of what your family will look like going forward versus preserving what you had.
because that's gone, right? It will never be. We always look at our past with those rose-colored glasses and say, oh, it wasn't that bad. Well, if it wasn't that bad, we wouldn't be where we're at. But we can create a better version. And you're right. And that's a great synopsis and a great way of closing this discussion in that there is a better future if we do it heartfelt and respectfully with each other.
Mm. Thank you, Thad, for such reassuring and practical advice. And it's always lovely chatting to you, even about the hard topics. And if anybody is experiencing this or they're a professional working with clients who experience this, like family lawyers or accountants or others, and they feel that a conversation with you would be helpful, then that's something that you make available as a complimentary initial call, right? Just to see if there's other
Absolutely.
resources that might help them or if there's something that you can certainly guide them with.
Yep. Agreed. That's it.
Brilliant. And if you have questions or want to reach out to Thad, the email address is admin at betteroutcomes.au. We will be here again next Wednesday, 12:30. See you then.
See you then.